Hey everyone, we are live. It's great to see you. Happy Saturday. Just a little treat for everyone. I'm going to do an oil painting video. This is already in progress. I'll go over one of my palettes. I use several different color mixing techniques. This is a different color mixing technique that I'm using that I'll show you today. It's pretty interesting. It's a kind of a limited palette, but it really works. It keeps the colors kind of unsaturated as they really are in life, and I think that would be really helpful. So just to start it out, hey Mark, how's it going? Great to see you. Mark Dietz all the way from Calgary. Go Flames. I'm going to show you this palette that I'm using today. It's not the palette I use all the time, and it's also not my Gideon color mixing method. This is different. I switch on and off. I've been painting since I was a kid, oil painting, so I have that ability to kind of change my palette for mood or even for particular painting. So the first color is ivory black, and then we have raw umber, and the second one is caput mortem. Caput mortem is a very interesting color because it's not available everywhere. Sennelier makes it, and I believe Old Holland might make it, but it's a very different color. It's a classic color that's been used for hundreds of years, and I really love it. We have Pale Rose Blush, and that's by Winsor & Newton. And we have Deep Blush, which is by Utrecht. And then we have, this is Naphthol Red Medium by Utrecht. This is Cadmium Orange by Winsor & Newton. This is Naples Yellow Hue Light, and that is by Utrecht. We have Yellow Ochre by Utrecht, Raw Sienna by Utrecht, and this is Utrecht White. So I don't stick with one brand. I basically stick with the paint that works for me, and that's basically what I'm used. That's basically what I do. So these colors are great. Some of them are shortcut colors, such as, you won't see this too often, Pale Blush and Pale Rose Blush are called shortcut colors. Cadmium Orange is called a shortcut color, but that is a color that you find in flesh almost all the time. Naples Yellow, I learned that since I was a kid. Yellow Ochre and Raw Sienna. They're very close, Yellow Ochre and Raw Sienna. But I find Raw Sienna is much better for mid-tones and also for the darks than Yellow Ochre. Each color has a value, so you want to basically have all the values in your palette. That's just my thing, and it seems to work very well. Actually, it does work very well for me. So we're gonna bring this in so we can see the painting that we're working on, and I'm gonna keep it so you can see my color mixing, which is great. And we'll put this here, and so there's nobody here yet. Mark's here, and that's all that matters. I'm so glad you're here, Mark. And so what I was working on today, I was working on her chin, so we'll zoom in a little bit on her chin. And I'm just going to continue working on the chin and just show you, what are my thoughts. Right here underneath her mouth, and right here is the depressor anguli oris. It's a muscle that kind of helps us frown. And there's a light, the depressor anguli oris is to the right, but just to the left of that, is this more powerful light. So I'm going to mix that more powerful light. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Pale Rose Blush, and I'm going to take a little bit of my Cadmium Orange, and it might be too powerful, but let's check. So right now we see, now I'm working wet onto wet, so the painting is wet. It's much like pastel. If it's wet, you kind of can play around and move it around, which is really important. So all this is wet before I start. So I remix the colors and I go ahead and make it all wet, so when I kind of put the color in, it reacts with the color that's there. Rather than trying to find that great mix, that perfect color and put it next to it, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't like painting that way. Easier is always the best way, as long as you're doing it right. Less effort is always the best way if you're doing it correctly. Why go the hard way if you don't? Why make it harder on yourself? That's the thing. So you see how that mixture, I can make it so it blends almost automatically. And just like an airbrush, you know, the more pressure, the more paint that's going to be applied. I'm going to put this color right up against those lips there, because there are no hard edges with the lips, unless she's wearing like lipstick, but I don't think she's wearing lipstick in this photo. And I'm constantly, you know, wiping my brush clean. And so this is probably the most powerful light in this chin area, but there's a little bit right here. Remember, the lighter you apply, the lighter the application of the paint. Right here it's a little bit of a gray, so I'm going to actually mix a nice gray color. So I'm going to take some of my raw umber and I'm going to isolate that color here. So right here we're going to have, I'm going to take some of our raw umber, a little bit of our cat orange, and so probably a little more of the raw umber than the cat orange. And I'm going to lightly apply, and it may be too dark, but remember, it's wet unto wet. This is wet. I'm also using stand oil, a mixture of 1:1 of stand oil with mineral spirits. And that's really good because it's going to slow down the drying time, so I'm going to be able to work longer without having it dry on me. One of the real great things about working with oil paint is this longest open drying time. See how I can come in and look at that and say, you know, that's nice, but maybe it's a little strong. So I can come back in with a orangey color. So we had that light, so let's go kind of in between the two here. And just lightly intermingle these two colors. And also make sure you take care of this edge here, because there won't be a hard edge. Just kind of intermingle that. And I'm going to bring this kind of shadowy flesh color right up against the lips. The lips are not wet paint right now, but we'll go and work on that. And I do like that shadow color, and we'll come back to that. Right here, at the corner of our lips, we have this shadow color that comes up here like this. Now, this is important. I don't know if this is wet. This is dry, so as I start working up here, I'm going to want to mix that real nice flesh tone here. So I'm going to take cat orange, some of this pale rose blush, And it's a little powerful, so I want to kill it just a tiny bit. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of the raw umber. And we'll see if it matches. It's a little dull, so that means we need to up the saturation. So we're going to add more of our cadmium orange. It's nice, but it's a little bit on the dark side, so I'm just going to add a little bit of the Naples yellow. See if we get it. And that's what we do. We want to make sure that we match that color. That's really close. So now, I like the second camera because you can see me mixing, and me describing it hopefully will help you. Leave a comment if you're watching this on record. Let me know if this helps you, if you have any questions. So now watch as I come here. Now I can work wet into wet, which is really crucial because then you could sculpt. Same thing here. I'm going to put this flesh color right up to the lip there and the philtrum. And you see how you just kind of move out. Here's a good trick. So let's say you put too much paint and you want to, like, oh, I didn't mean to put it on the shadow of the philtrum. So you can just pull that off with your Q-tip. And it's a great technique, and you can use the Q-tip as a blender. There we go. And now that we're working on here, we can definitely kind of scooch up a little bit. So let's go back to our little shadow right up here. See how this comes up. Now it's wet unto wet, and I have much more tools to make this work. Hey, Mr. Dave, how's it going, my friend? I just finished your airbrush yesterday, so that's exciting. It works perfectly. We're going to be able to do the hairs on a fly's leg. So that's going to be going out Monday, sir. So it's great to see you, Mr. Gregory. How are you, sir? And just a little bit of little different today, doing a little bit of oil painting, you know. So I said, you know what? Why don't I just do a live stream, show you all my palette, you know? Ah, thank you, sir. That's great. Yes, you're gonna love the airbrush. It's really a lot of fun. Oh, and now that I have this, now I'll take a sable brush, and this is a clean sable brush, and this is like a, looks like a #1 pure red sable. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of blend the wet into wet, which is really a great technique, working wet into wet. And then just clean your brush as you go. And then you can take your light color that you mixed and you can bring that in here, just like so. Kind of work that together. And then eventually you'll assimilate everything, and you'll find that there's a lot. Ah, Mr. Gregory, thanks for the super chat, my friend. What an honor. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming to this impromptu live stream. It's so cool. I'm glad somebody came and hopefully enjoys it. And it's so great to see you, sir. And so I find a lot of times that when I'm doing the shadows, if I actually kind of bring in the light color into the shadows and kind of dapple that in. There's a lot of the shadows in the light and light in the shadows. It's not like a hard fixed color that you just match. It's a lot deeper than that, and I find that as I paint more in oils, it really helps me to understand how to work in airbrush, and vice versa too. I'm going to bring this shadow tone down here, and this is the nasolabial fold, and we're just going to bring this down. It's like you're constantly drawing when you're painting, right? You're constantly adjusting and drawing. And what I'm doing is just kind of working in this area, trying to get a handle on this. Very different than working in airbrush in a lot of ways, but very similar in a lot of ways as well. Now remember, you know, working wet onto wet is really important. So this area is dry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with this area here, kind of mix that color, so I can continue that whole wet into wet thing. And right now it looks kind of archaic, but we have this sable brush that's a blender, and we'll just kind of pull this value edge into here, kind of make it look more like it's part of her overall face and not just this like line that's there out of nowhere, and that would be bad. But the thing is, with oils, it really is amazing on how much, when you work wet onto wet, you can just really not make a mistake, because anything is easily covered, and by thicker paint and stuff like that. Let's bring this. Now it's sort of like, you know, when you do one thing, the dominoes kind of fall. We're going to work on her nose, but before that I'm going to bring this color over. What I want to do is, I have this shadow color, but it's a little more lighter, right? So I'm going to bring some of this lighter color in here, and maybe a little more red. And now I could kind of move this value. And that's a little too dark, so I want to go lighter. So I'm actually going to pull in some of my deep blush, I believe, from Utrecht. And maybe it might be best to do that with the lighter brush. I have kind of brushes designated to light and dark. Okay, so now you can see I'm pulling in this value, making it wet, and then moving this down. Hey Willie, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. How you feeling, my friend? So glad you're here. Willie from Massachusetts. So glad you're here, my friend. How's life treating you? I'm going to add a little more red here, and we're just going to pull this over. I'm so glad I did this live stream. I got to see Dave and Willie. This is great. And I'm just kind of bringing this in. You see how it kind of assimilates, and working this wet onto wet is a lot of fun, because you can just put it in there. If you don't like it, you erase a little bit. Oh, I'm doing okay, my friend. Working hard. Got a lot of different coals in the fire. You know me. And that sort of thing. Still doing the airbrush, of course, and doing a lot more oil painting lately. Especially ever since I really got back into it last year. It's a little more red here, so I'm going to bring some of this red here. like this. Oh yes, never stop, my friend. I'm like a shark. If I stop moving, I'll die. And so I'm actually adding more red here. So I take a little bit of my naphthol red. Which is nice because, you know, it's more red because there's more blood in her cheeks area, right? So we're going to add more red here. Now it's all predicated on the ability to go ahead and kind of blend as we go. So that's why, otherwise I would just stay in that one area, but the fact is, as I kind of go outward, I have to make sure that everything is nice and wet. So bring this in, and then this comes down here, and then I can bring this naphthol red a little bit, mixing in with this, kind of bringing this down and lightly blending. So I'm mixing my paint just a tiny bit when I need it to kind of give it more flow. I'm using a 1-to-1 mixture of stand oil, linseed stand oil, and Gamsol or turpentine, whatever you have, that sort of paint thinner kind of thing happening. And I do have a fan brush. Let me go get the fan brush. These fan brushes are fantastic. I'm not trying to be funny with the play on words, but yes, so I can take this fan brush and just kind of blend it out. Because I want to get that 19th century kind of Jean Auguste Dominique Ingres look. So just kind of blending that in, making it more refined, wiping it on the rag every so often. And I'll zoom out just a little bit so you all can see, you know, where I am. And for those who came in a little bit late, I'm going to go over my colors again. So this way you can see exactly, you know, what I'm working with. And we'll come here, and so these are my colors for this. This is not part of my Gideon color theory. This is a different color theory I'm using. So I'll start from the dark side and kind of here. So this is Ivory Black, Raw Umber. This is Caput Mortem. Sennelier makes it. It's hard to get that color. Then we have by Winsor & Newton, Pale Rose Blush. We have Deep Blush by Utrecht. These colors are shortcut colors. You can mix them, but they're good to have if you're doing flesh, so they're really fantastic to have. Naphthol Red by Utrecht. This is Winsor & Newton. These are the artist grade colors, all of them, not student grade. This is Cadmium Yellow. Oh no, Cadmium Orange, forgive me. And that's by Winsor & Newton. This is by Utrecht, and this is Naples Yellow Light Hue. And this is Yellow Ochre, Raw Sienna, and then this is Utrecht White. So with this I can basically paint any portrait. It has all the colors that I need, some of the shortcut colors, and the gray and the raw umber is good for, you know, kind of neutralizing colors, especially in the shadows and the transition tone. So those are very important to have. So it's a very good palette to work with. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. I mean, it's not a lot of colors, and you can get them pretty inexpensive. So we're going to continue here. So see how things kind of build out. So we're going to have to come in here with this light color. So let's go ahead and mix that light color. So that was some of the Pale Rose Blush, a little bit of the Cadmium Orange, and we want to neutralize it a little bit, so we'll get a little bit of our Raw Umber. Kind of pull that in here. And always wipe your brush, because I did pull up too much of the raw umber. It was on the brush and kind of blended in. Remember, you have to make sure when you mix it, the big test is when you put it on the palette, on the painting. And that's a little too dark, so that means I'm going to add a little bit more of my deep blush and a little tiny bit of my Gamblin orange. Because it's a little too gray, and then it gets like super dull, and then it looks terrible on the flesh. Let's see. That's pretty good. So now I feel comfortable. So now I can bring that in. Maybe just give it a little more light, a little more of that deep blush. And this will really help your, if you do different mediums, it really helps your airbrush. So it's good to think about that. And it's just a lot of fun. A lot of people think that that oil painting is too expensive. It's one of the least expensive mediums to start out with. And if anyone's interested, I'll send a little list for you if you're ever interested into trying oil paints. And I'll be doing more videos, so more live streams in oils, and so this way you could really explore it. So now we're working really nicely, and then I can go back, wipe my brush, and go back to that reddish color that we were using over here, that reddish orange. And so this would be the zygomatic bone as it comes down into the maxilla. So what I'm going to do is kind of bring this down into that nasolabial fold. See how it all kind of interacts with one another. So you really can't do one without affecting other areas. Very, very important to keep that in mind. So now I can take, and one thing, never save a paper towel. I mean, they're inexpensive. Throw it away once it starts getting dirty, because what happens is it gets on your hand, gets on your brushes, gets on the cat, and it's terrible. So always get another paper towel. Rags are best, but they tend to get really expensive. So I'm just going to use my clean fan. This is not a fan brush, this is a clean sable brush. And I'm just going to really work this to where I get even though it's like maybe a midpoint of the painting, I still wanted to have the refinement, as this is the last time I'm going to be able to paint this picture, God forbid. And it's also, this is a good time to work on your drawing, right? So I can see that this light coming down is a little bit further. So we can sculpt wet into wet, right? So we don't have to mix it and then mix the other color. Since everything's wet, it's like working with wet clay, which is really a lot of fun. And we can blend this area. Just kind of assimilating those colors together. She's one organism. Yes, she has a lot of parts, but she's one organism. Oh, Dave says, have a good Saturday, Tim. Got to get back to the fundraiser. Always a pleasure, Dave. I will be emailing you about next week's lesson, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. And don't work too hard, my friend. Take care, Dave. Thank you so much for the super chat. I super appreciate it. And I appreciate your friendship, sir. And so basically, it's just, continuing to, move back and forth until you feel like, okay, I'm done. And when that happens, nobody knows. But everyone knows that Picasso said that a painting is never finished, only abandoned. And I think that's true to a certain extent. And after I work on, you know, this area a little bit, I'm going to come in and start working on her face. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of the lighter color with the medium color here, and I'm going to work this up here. Kind of bring up. So this is the malafat compartment. We have the zygomatic bone, and then there's a muscle here called the masseter, and that comes out, and you're going to see more light hitting this area. So just kind of bringing this up here like that. Very subtle little changes. But all the colors are very related to one another, as it should be. You don't want there to be too much of a different color shift as we're working. There are going to be different variations of the same hues most of the time. I don't want to go into a dogmatic approach, but I mean that's a lot of the time. It's going to be going from the main hue being orange to yellow orange, or orange to red orange, that sort of thing, as opposed to orange to green or orange to purple. You're going to see that a lot less, and when you paint that way, it's going to make a big difference in your painting looking like she's unified. There's nothing, she's not wearing weird makeup, you know, natural. And then you can come back in with your blender brush here. Kind of make sure you're not being too harsh, right? That's important. And then we'll come in up here a little bit, because we want to kind of blend that in. So we want to make sure that we get the adjacent values. Wiping the brush so you keep things clean. And we have the fan brush, which is like a more overall kind of blend here, kind of softer. And zooming out, you can see we're getting a little bit more of a softer feel to her. It takes a while. It's not easy. We'll come back in with this shadow here. It's better to build up a soft shadow than to have it too harsh. And now what we can do, which is pretty cool, is actually, let's work on this area a little bit darker. So I'm going to take my mixture, of course, put my other brushes down. I'm going to take the cadmium orange, a little bit of our raw umber, and looking at that little tiny bit of our naphthol red. So we start out with this kind of reddish orange hue, and then we want to kill it a little bit, so a little bit more of the raw umber. Now, why raw umber and not using the complement is because when you do that and use the complement, it's a danger of getting, you know, your colors not unified. So stick with the same hue family. Okay, so that looks pretty good, but we won't know until we put it on the painting, right? And what do they say? That every battle plan is great until contact with the enemy? Same thing. Just going to see this. See this? This is a little dark. So we'll just lighten it up with a little bit more of our pale blush here. Deep Blush by Utrecht. Utrecht Artist Oil Paints. It's a little bit high on the chroma, so I'm going to add just a little bit of raw sienna to it. Raw sienna is a nice color. It'll kind of kill that orange a little bit and kind of bring it in line. A little bit deeper here. Now we can take our blender brush and kind of assimilate that, you know. Oh, great. Willie says, Tim, how much do you have into this piece? Is it more time consuming than airbrush? Good question. It is, because what I like to do is I like to do the underpainting in airbrush. So, you know, I go through the India ink and I use the India ink and the airbrush after I have the line drawing. Sometimes, not with this particular painting, but sometimes I'll actually come in with the lifeline colors and do the underpainting, and then once that's done, then, you know, when I'm working on this, so this is aluminum, I don't use any shellac or anything, I just paint over the acrylic, right? But if I'm working on paper, what I'll do, like the Canson paper that you know I work on, sir, what I would do is I would actually shellac it. So I'll put a layer of shellac after the India ink underpainting. So this way it'll accept the oil. And I also do that when I work in color too, because I want to clear coat it. So by shellacking the color line paper, I can clear coat it at the end. So a little bit different technique than I have been doing in the past, which goes back to the whole thing of, you know, working in oils really affects how I work and prepare my surfaces in airbrush. Great question, sir. You see how, you know, just by working wet into wet, I can sculpt the three-dimensional qualities. So definitely it's more consuming with oil paints, time consuming, but it's just like a different animal, you know. So I don't mind it. I kind of love it. Plus, here's the thing: I get like twice the price as far as selling it when I work in oils, and it's weird how that is. Like working in acrylic or airbrush, you don't get the same price than working, and I'm just talking about me and my work, not other artists. Other artists working acrylics get a lot more than I do, but as far as me, I can get a better price using painting in oils than I could painting in airbrush, especially portraits, almost like double the price. It's all the perception, you know. I mean, it's like the difference between, let's say, you know, a Camaro and an Alfa Romeo, right? It's kind of like that kind of difference. You know, cars are basically the same, but just has a different price tag. So now you can see how things are kind of shaping up and how I have to do one before the other. And then doing something kind of has a domino effect to the next thing. Yeah, it's interesting how that works. You know, I've been in the art world since I was, you know, in my 20s, and it's always been that way. So if there's like, let's say, a juried exhibition and there is awards. So if you did an acrylic painting or watercolor painting, the top award would be like $800. But the top award for an oil painting would be like $3,000. So that permeates everywhere in the art world. That hierarchy. And I love pastels, but I don't get the oil painting price. So that's one of the reasons. So here's something interesting, Willie. Out of everything, I was trained longer in oils than anything else. So I have more of a background, 8 years of training in oils. And I stopped painting in oils for years, and just came back, and I was just surprised how fast I was able to pick it up. But 8 years is a long time to study, right? So, and this is like every day, 5 days a week for 8 years. And I studied with some of the most amazing painters ever. Let's zoom out a little bit. And this is something that you don't have the ability to do with other mediums, is kind of sculpt around. So see here, it's a little bit darker. So here's an opportunity. I'm going to go here and show you how I would kind of get that color. So now I have this caput mortem, and caput mortem is really funny. It actually means deadhead, and it was said to be used from human remains. Not anymore, of course. And we'll just put this here, and then some ivory black. And this caput mortem makes a really wonderful dark kind of maroon color. I don't want to go that dark, so I'm going to add some of my cat orange to this. Remember, it's all a shift of the hue, right? So you just kind of shift it. And that caput mortem is going to take care of our red, so we don't have to add any naphthol red. But maybe we can add a little tiny bit of our raw umber. I don't have burnt umber on my palette. I should. I think that would help me here, but we'll make do here. Now remember, every plan doesn't survive when there's contact with the enemy. And so now I have to see how this reacts to the surface. And I just want to darken that up a little bit. True, Willie, the world is goofy. As far as he's concerned, you should be a multi-millionaire from your art. Thank you, my friend. From your lips to God's ear, my friend. I appreciate that. You know, I try really hard, you know, and I always try and get better. And I'll just leave the results up to God, you know. But I never stop trying to improve, become a better teacher, become a better live streamer, you know, that sort of thing. And then I know success will follow. It's just, we kind of wish it would follow more quickly, but it's going to go at its own pace. And since it's wet onto wet, I can kind of just ease that in, right? It's really great. Now, I want to get involved in some of the little detail here. Before I do that, I'm going to get the larger values first. And I want to do the line of her, or crease of her lower eyelid. And then I can blend this in a little bit. Well, actually, I need something to blend, so I'm going to come in with this color here. And it's always like working back and forth, you know? And it's such an honor that I have my work in your collection, Willie. I remember the one I did of Villanelle that you purchased. That was one of my favorite live stream paintings. I really loved painting her. It was a lot of fun. What's really interesting is that we can see how one color, when we put it down, affects the adjacent color, and so it goes, right? Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for adding it to your collection. It's a super honor for me. I appreciate that so much. I did like that show, Killing Eve. I never did I gotta finish the last couple of seasons, or the last two seasons, I think. So I really love the kind of 4 years where I just worked exclusively in airbrush, maybe a little bit of pastel, and kind of let the other mediums lay dormant for a while. But it really was great because it really helped me to really get my arms around airbrush. And we all know that airbrush is not easy. Otherwise, all these other artists would be doing airbrush. It gets a bad rap, but you know how many people can do it? That's the question. So remember earlier I said if I go too harsh, I could always kind of remove it with a Q-tip. Now we're going to go back into this dark color here. I'm going to use a detail brush. And we're going to see what that looks like. It may be way too harsh. I'm thinking it is. Just like erasing though, you know, if you have an aggressive eraser but you're very gentle with it, it's going to be gentle. So the same thing, I may have a dark color here that's a little too dark, but since I'm working wet into wet, if I go lightly, it will lightly assimilate with the color that's already wet on the surface. And this is how, you know, I develop the eye, you know, and just move in, and so I can see I want to do the light as it hits the malar fat compartment over here. But I'm able to get this crease here. And it may be a little strong, and also I can see how the white of her eye is just way too strong, right? And we might be a little strong with the saturation of this color here. And then we have this beautiful dark right here on the shadow side of her eyelid. And then just keep coming back. Now I'm going to add a tiny bit of my linseed Gamsol or mineral spirits here. Now I usually work with this stuff here, which is the Gamblin solvent-free gel, and I really love it. But what I'm finding is now that I'm working wet onto wet, that it's not open. So the next day it's already dry. Or even like I'll start a painting like maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I want to come back to it maybe 9 o'clock at night, and then it's too late. It's already super dark. And it's just like this whole domino effect. So we have this crease here. And I find the more detail you do, the more things kind of start softening up, especially when painting a woman's portrait. And children. We don't want it to be harsh. We can get away with it with a man's portrait, but still, you want to have a sensitivity about it. Ah, thank you. Mr. Willie says I have a good eye for women, Tim. If you ever want to fix me up with one, oh yeah. Well, I got to make sure I get one for me first, and maybe we can do a double, double date. So we have to find two, Willie. Yeah, women are my favorite subjects in art and life. Definitely, Willie. And it's like pastel, right, Willie? You can just, if I was working in pastel, I would do the same thing. I would bring this color in here and then blend it, right? And kind of work it together. It's wet onto wet, so it's just going to assimilate, which is great. And, you know, working wet into wet, I find that it kind of brings everything together, homogenizes everything. Make sure this is wet over here. And then we'll do a little blending with our clean sable brush. And then over here, we can definitely kind of blend this a little bit. Move this dark further in. There we go. Now, what we can do is work on this brush to come in with a lighter value. So we're going to take more of our deep blush by Utrecht, some of our cad orange. We want a light, right? So come here. So we got to get hue, saturation, and value. So the hue is the orange family, and the saturation is, you know, how powerful it is, and then the value. So we want a light value, we want an orange color, and now we got to see what the saturation is. And we don't know until we actually put that on the surface here. And looking at this, it's a little dull, so I'm going to add a little bit more of our deep blush and a tiny bit more of our orange. And that will bring the saturation a little bit, but still maintain the value, hopefully. Let's see. A little strong with the value, so maybe just lighten it up with a little bit of titanium white. But this is Utrecht white, which is their version. So titanium white seems to be a little stiff, so they add a little bit of zinc white to it. Just bring a little bit in here. Let's see what this does. Okay, that's really nice. So that's good. And you see how it's going to work all the way up into here, but we're going to bring this in. And, you know, she's a beautiful woman, so we have to make sure that we maintain the softness and elegance that is her. And you see, you can just bring that in as if you were working with pastel. Kind of blend that in. Got to make sure we keep her nice and soft. Get rid of any harshness that might be creeping into the painting. So right here it seems like it's a little harsh. So I know I have to soften this up. And some light is hitting the zygomatic area right here. But notice how I'm keeping in the same family of colors, right? The same hues, right? The hue changes would be from your main hue would be the orange, yellow, orange, or red, orange. Really, that's basically it. And there aren't many hue shifts, so that's why I'm not a big fan of using complements, because it tends to go outside of what nature is doing. Now I'll get my fan brush, which is fantastic, and we'll kind of assimilate this here. Wiping clean as I come down. So while I'm looking at it, I can say, all right, this could be a little softer here. Especially in here. Kind of compress these values a little bit. If you compress the values, so what I'll do is I'll kind of take this lighter color and kind of excuse me, sorry about that, rather violent sneeze. So by compressing the values a little bit, definitely helps to soften her up. Now here's an interesting thing. I'm going to zoom in and show you what a dangerous thing this is. When working oils, and if you don't have the most expensive brushes, sometimes I don't. I have some really good ones that were gifted to me. But see that little hair? That's a bad thing. So we have to get that hair out of there because it will dry right on your painting. And I think there's another hair right there. Let's see. That's actually dried in. There's nothing you can do about it. Once it's dry, you do more damage. But yeah, be careful of that. Ah, thank you, Willie. I appreciate that. Willie says, God bless you. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. And bringing this over here like this. Just compressing those values a little bit. Now we can take that light color that we had. We'll zoom out. That's it for, you know, the importance of getting rid of hairs. So right here we have this light color. I'm going to bring this light color over here. Now you can do like underpaintings, Willie, where you can go pretty far, you know, with Createx and get a beautiful underpainting and then paint over that, and you'll really love the effects. I mean, it's really great. Let's move this in here. That's a little rough, but I can kind of blend this out. That was a little rough. I don't recommend doing that. Let's see if we could do a better job here. See, that's a little bit on the, I'm going to add some chroma to that, add some saturation to that. It was a little dull. And then maybe a little bit of this deep blush. Now come in with this color, the lighter color, kind of blend them together. And definitely could use a little bit more saturation here. Live and learn. Always make sure you have a clean brush, because I paid the price. But in oils, the price isn't that bad. Everything's easily fixable. And now come back in with that light color that we mixed earlier. Kind of shape the cheek there, exactly what's happening. And we're starting to soften her up a little bit, but we can see where there's some harsh value changes. So compressing these values, making these values a little closer to one another, really softens her up. You guys agree? You know, go a little bit closer in value. I'm doing that on my Wednesday night live streams, Willie. I'm working on an angel, and there are like there's more contrast, but what I'm doing is kind of compressing that contrast and those values together to create a softer, more aesthetically beautiful painting. So going against the photorealism thing. And then once you're painted, then you want to come in and blend it. And we're going to come back to this lighter color here. Right here. The other side of the nasolabial fold. Bringing this down. And we still got to come in with that nose. Yes, definitely, right? Just by, you know, kind of assimilating those values, Willie, it makes her much softer and more elegant. I agree. And that's what I'm learning lately, is compressing of the values. And that has really kind of changed things in a good way. So I'm always trying to take it to that next level, Willie, you know? And you can see I'm neglecting the nose, and you see how harsh that is to where we were working. But we'll get to the nose. And her mouth. And this eye, which is totally neglected too. But we'll get there. kind of blend this in a little bit. So there's some areas that are a little bit, you know, that we can go against, you know, go against what we see and kind of paint what makes a more beautiful painting, a beautiful portrait. Right here I can see it's a little harsh. So I'm going to take my blender brush here, kind of soften that up a little bit. And you can see overall it has a nice feeling of finish. And then here, this is a little harsh. So kind of blend that out a little bit. Compress those values, right? So maybe I'll just kind of assimilate this into other parts. And then I could, you know, more or less sculpt the orbicularis, the muscle that goes around her mouth. Orbicularis meaning orbit, and then oris meaning mouth. So we have kind of show the light as it moves from the orbicularis into the maxilla, into the malar fat, and then into the zygomatic bone. See how it kind of connects here, right? It has that connection. Because light moves across the form, right? So it moves across her face. And that's where the missing, you know, like something missing when you get that character, you know, is understanding what light is doing on her form. And then by compressing those values, she retains her femininity and grace and all of that good stuff. And see how it comes right up from here and then right over here, and you get that sense of light moving down the form. And notice I'm not too bright yet, right? Because we're compressing those values. Here it's too bright, so I'm going to kind of calm that down. But right here on the philtrum, it'd be a good time to kind of hit this philtrum here. I know I talk a lot about anatomy and everything like that, only because it helps me so much, right? So if it helps me, I always like to share it. You know, and it's not that many muscles and bones in the face. If you're painting portraits, I mean, I don't think there's more than like 20 things in the face, like landmark anatomical forms, whether it be muscle, bone, or fat compartments. Now that light is a little bit, it needs more. If it's too gray, so let's say you're mixing a light or a shadow and it's too gray, that means you need more saturation. So whatever the main color is, you just add that to your mix, and that should get the color in shape. And then if you need a little bit lighter, try adding a lighter color. So I'm going to put a little bit of this Naples yellow hue. Right here. And see how you can sculpt that form. Bring this down. And continue this light as it goes from the Orbicularosaurus to the malafat compartment to the zygomatic bone. And then now you can take your, see how this is dirty? Throw it away. Don't save it. I mean, it's only a paper towel. What's going to happen is when you clean your brush, you're just going to be putting more paint on it. So you want to make sure that you have a clean paper towel. And by, you know, blending these colors together, you're going to have a really beautiful painting. A nice finished quality. Not finished from Finland. You know. But feel that nice sense of light. And now I can come in and I'm going to use a fresh brush because that other brush was too dark, you know. And so I'm going to go into mix a nice shadow. So I'm going to get a little bit of my natural red and then some of my raw umber and then a little bit of my deep blush, maybe a little bit of the cat orange. And we're working wet onto wet, very important consideration here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the shadow side of this philtrum. It's a little high in saturation, so we're going to kill that saturation with some more raw umber. We're going to add just the tiniest bit of my stand oil. So if, like me, you want to have more time to blend and maybe go eat something and then come back and have it still wet, then you want to use your stand oil 1-to-1 mixture with mineral spirits, whether it be Gamsol or whatever brand. Mix that 1-to-1. If you wanted to dry quicker, then I would use this stuff, which is the Gamblin solvent-free gel. It's really great. I love it. But you come back after having dinner, everything's going to already start to dry. Especially since I work thin, you know. So always keep that in consideration. And like I said, starting oil painting is not an expensive endeavor. You'll be surprised. It's one of the most inexpensive endeavors to begin. And I'm going to be doing more oil painting live streams, pastel live streams. Wednesday will always be my airbrush live stream. But I'll be doing more, hopefully, God willing. And so I think we really succeeded in kind of softening things up and kind of developing the forms. Now I can take my fan brush and kind of soften things up a little bit more. And I'm happy with it. You know, it takes time to develop the forms and everything, but you can see it's not bad, and things are really starting to soften up. So, yeah, I'm going to stay in this area because it's wet and kind of build this up, and then I'm going to move into this area of the shadow kind of the Rembrandt lighting here, and kind of build up from there. Now this painting is quite interesting. It's on aluminum. So you see the back is aluminum. So just an experimentation. It's the second painting on aluminum, and I really like it. It's very, in the beginning you get a lot of this stuff where you have to do like a couple of layers before it really starts taking, and it's very, you can scratch it, but once I'm done I'm going to go ahead and do a varnish over it, and then from there it'll be nice and you know, stable. So guys, Willie, thank you so much for hanging out with me, sir. I really appreciate it. Dave, it was good to see you. And Mark, thanks for coming by. I just wanted to share my oil painting with you today. I hope it was helpful. And if you have any questions, always IM me, and I'll be always happy to answer them. Willie, it's great to see you, sir. You have a great weekend, and it was such a great pleasure to hang out with you today. Bye, everybody, and once again, thanks so much for hanging out.